Hello and welcome to Selection Friday as we join you from an empty arena, the Donald W. Reynolds Center on the campus of the University of Tulsa. And this is not unlike any other gym across the country or any other arena, as the ball has gone flat on our spring 2020. We're all disappointed with the COVID-19 cancellation of the 2020 NCAA basketball tournament, but we thought we would have some fun here at the University of Tulsa and let you, the fans, you, the voters, if you will, vote on the all-time great University of Tulsa basketball teams. And you can vote on Twitter at TUM Basketball, but of course we will have the brackets available on all of our social media, including TulsaHurricane.com. So how are we going to do this? We are going to separate the quadrants by decade. So we will have 1980s, 1990s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. We will have a bracket reveal, just like Selection Sunday, and we'll do that in just a moment. But first of all, at the end of each bracket, we are going to go to our expert panel. And our expert panel are these two gentlemen. Don Tomkowski, who is the longtime sports information director at the University of Tulsa and currently the assistant athletic director in charge of media relations. He's been here since the mid-1980s. And Barry Lewis, a University of Tulsa student, first started covering TU back in his days at the Collegian here at TU, graduated in the early 80s, so he obviously has a breadth of knowledge and is a TU basketball historian. So that is our expert panel. All right, let's get to our bracket reveal, and after each bracket, we will be going to those two gentlemen and discuss it a little bit. All right, let's go to the 1980s bracket for University of Tulsa basketball. All right, at the top of the bracket, we have the number one seed. The number one seed is the 1983-1984 basketball team. That's Nolan Richardson's fourth team. They went 27-4 on the season. They won their first 15 games. They won the Missouri Valley Conference regular season and the tournament championships, and they were ranked as high as number 9 in the nation. Now, they were the fourth seed in the NCAA and lost a heartbreaker to Louisville in the first round in Milwaukee. Very good basketball team. So the number one seed will be taking on the number 4 seed in the 1980s, and the number 4 seed is the 1981-82 basketball team coached by Nolan Richardson. And that team ended up going 24-8. That was Nolan's second team following up on the NIT championship team. They won the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. They finished second in the Missouri Valley Conference, and they ended up being the best seed ever in the NCAA tournament. They were a number 3 seed. However, they lost to Phi Slamma Jamma. Actually, they weren't called that at that time, but the Houston Cougars eventually became Phi Slamma Jamma, and one reason was they had a great run in that tournament, starting with their victory over the University of Tulsa. So there you have the number 1 seed against the number 4 seed, and voting begins on Monday, March 23rd at 9 a.m. All right, let's reveal the bottom of the bracket of the 1980s, the number 2 seed. And it is the 1980-81 basketball team, the first team of Nolan Richardson, a classic team, no question. 26-7 on the year. They won the NIT title, beating Syracuse in the final. They were in second place in the Missouri Valley Conference. No question about it. When Nolan Richardson came to Tulsa, he energized and resurrected the TU program. No question, that is a very special team. Again, winning the NIT championship, beating Syracuse in the final at Madison Square Garden. All right, the number 3 seed is the 1984-1985 team. That was the final team for Nolan Richardson. They went 23-8 on the year. They won 17 of their first 19 ball games, and they were ranked as high as number 12 in the nation. They won the Missouri Valley Conference regular season and then lost in a heartbreaker to Wichita State in the tournament finals, 84-82. They were the number 6 seed in the NCAA, and they ended up losing to UTEP. 79-75 was the final score there. And voting will begin on Monday, March 23rd at 11 a.m. So there is the 1980s brackets of University of Tulsa basketball. And again, you can vote on Twitter at TUM Basketball. And let's go to our panel of experts now, Don Tomkowski and Barry Lewis. And gentlemen, what do you think of that bracket, 1980s? Some difficult decisions there, I'm sure.
Very difficult, because you could have also picked either of J.D. Barnett's 2 NCAA tournament teams from 1986 and 1987. in the 1983 NIT team was also pretty good. But I think those are definitely the 4 best that are on the bracket.
Barry, I don't know how you get a tougher bracket than this bracket. I mean, that 83-84 team was my first year here, and with that backcourt of Steve Harris and Ricky Ross, 6'7" and 6'5", I mean, that's a stout team there.
There was not a better guard combination in the country than Steve Harris and Ricky Ross. And Ricky Ross, in my mind, is one of the 5 best clutch shooters in TU history.
It's a great one, Bruce.
Yeah, it's definitely an absolutely terrific bracket, and when you think about, again, some of the teams, as we have our arguments about this, some of the teams perhaps that were left out, but you know, you can only pick 4, so probably the hardest part was coming up with 4, wasn't it?
It was difficult, extremely difficult, but I mean, Nolan Richardson won so many games here in just 5 short years, and those teams just happened to be his teams, and they were, you know, I obviously didn't see the first 2, the 80-81 or the 81-82 team, but those other 2, I know were pretty darn special.
And Barry, you were here during that period of time as a student, right? In
Yes.
the first team, the team that ended up causing 10,000 people to come and go downtown. I mean, there was something special about the energy and what happened during that period of time. What was going on?
It really captured the city's imagination, and it was a group of players that they knew how to win because they came from Western Texas Junior College with Nolan, and they won the National JUCO Championship the year before. And they just kept winning here, beating the defending national champion Louisville very early in the 1980-81 season. And that just really set the tone for an exciting era of Golden Hurricane basketball under Nolan Richardson.
Okay, so there you have the bracket for 1980, and the voting begins on the 23rd, on Monday, March 23rd. So get your votes in on Twitter. And now let's move to the 1990s bracket in University of Tulsa basketball history, and we will reveal now the number 1 seed in the 90s bracket. The number 1 seed is the 1993-94 Tubby Smith team. TU with the 23-8 record in their 3rd year, and you can see they're very excited and very happy to be selected and be on Selection Friday here as they celebrate getting selected into our bracket. And they won the Missouri Valley Conference regular season championship. They lost in the semifinals of the tournament, and they had to sweat it out in the NCAA Selection Sunday, but they were one of the last picked, and they were picked to take on UCLA as a number 12 seed, and they beat the number 5 seeded Bruins. The huge upset at the Myriad in Oklahoma City, and they advance to the next round, beating OSU. First ever Sweet 16 appearance for TU, winning over UCLA 112-102, and then beating OSU 82-80. A couple of iconic games, certainly for the program and for head coach Tubby Smith, before they lost to Arkansas in the regionals. So that's the number 1 seed in the 1990s. The number 4 seed is the 1998-99 Bill Self squad, the second team for Bill Self. They went 23-10 on the season. They won the WAC Mountain Division Co-Championship, and then they lost in the WAC semifinals in a close game in overtime to Utah. They ended up being a number 9 seed in the NCAA. They defeated College of Charleston in one of the most amazing games you would ever see. They were ahead by 26 in the second half. The lead melted down to 2, but Tulsa was able to survive and advance to the second round, where they lost to a very, very good Duke team. So there you have it. It's the number 1 seed against the number 4 seed, and the voting begins on Thursday, March 26th at 9 a.m. Let's go to the bottom of the 1990s bracket now. The number 2 seed, the 1994-95 University of Tulsa team, Tubby Smith's final year, the second Sweet 16 team. They go 24-8 on the year. They won the Missouri Valley Conference regular season. They lost in the finals to Southern Illinois in the tournament, but they were seeded number 6 in the East Regional in Albany, New York, as they went to the NCAA, and they beat Illinois with a comeback in the second half, and then they downed Old Dominion again to reach the Sweet 16 for the second straight year before losing to UMass in the regionals. The number 3 seed is the 1996-97 team, as that was Steve Robinson's second squad. Now, they didn't win the WAC regular season or the tournament championship, but they did defeat number 5 UCLA and number 12 New Mexico during the course of the season. They were a very good seed. They were seeded number 5 on the season in the NCAA as they beat Boston up in Kansas City, but then they lost to Clemson in the second round in the famous Shea Seals phantom foul game, but TU did lose to Clemson in the second round. And again, voting on that begins on Thursday, March 26th. And so we've seen the 1990s bracket, and we've seen some of the reaction, the excitement of the teams by being selected. And we head now to our panel of experts. 1990s, another very good bracket here.
I don't know how you beat the 93-94 team, Barry. I mean, obviously one common denominator on 3 of those teams, Shea Seals. And you can't go wrong with any of those teams, but in my eyes, 93-94 stands out.
Yes, when I think of great moments in TU basketball, again, what Bruce alluded to, I don't think there's been a more exhilarating or more rewarding 48 hours than we saw in Oklahoma City at the NCAA tournament when Tulsa pulls off the victory over tradition-rich UCLA and then defeats Oklahoma State by 2 points with a great second-half comeback capped by Lou Dawkins' iconic three-pointer.
There's no question. You talk about that UCLA game. I mean, Tulsa's up by 29 in the first half, and it was probably, in my years here, the best half of basketball by far that I've seen a Tulsa basketball team perform.
And I remember being in the media room before the game where the SoCal media, they were just so confident. They didn't give Tulsa a chance at all. And then at halftime, they were they were shell-shocked. And then after the game, they wanted Jim Herrick fired. So that was quite a day. And of course, UCLA goes on to win Jim Herrick was not fired, and UCLA goes on to win the national championship the next year, which I think makes this TU victory and a performance against UCLA in '94 even more impressive.
You know, I think, guys, that there is an emotional attachment to that team, the first Sweet 16 team and the first team essentially to win a first-round game in the NCAA. The 1955 team won a consolation game in the NCAA, but essentially it was the first NCAA victory by any team. And yet when you look at this bracket, especially on the lower half with the number 6 seed and the number 5 seed in the NCAA, and even the team that will face the 93-94 team, Bill Self's team, was a number 9 seed. Even though the emotional attachment is there, of those 4 teams, it's the lowest seed of all 4. But there will be an emotional vote here, I'm sure.
There's no question. You talk about the 98-99 team. That team and that tournament propelled them to that next year, right, where they went to the where we went to the NCAA Elite Eight. That loss against Duke, and that was a message Bill had. This feeling you do not like, and let's turn that into something next year. So,
and you look at the 1990s bracket, not all the good teams from the 90s could make it, because the 96 team won in their last Missouri Valley Conference tournament, won the Valley Championship, and so that was a tough team to leave off, but you can only pick 4, and unfortunately that 96 team could not hold on to a first round lead against Louisville. So I think we've got 4 really good teams from the 1990s.
Yeah, no question. And there would be some that would argue that Steve Robinson's second team was a really strong team and probably should have or could have gone very deep in the tournament, and unfortunately ran into a situation where their best player got in foul trouble.
Yeah, I think it was 3 minutes in, and Shea Seals already had 3 fouls. Right. You know, it was a very good team. You know, deep and solid team. But I still go back to liking 93-94.
Me too. It's got my vote.
Well, there you have it. That is the 90s, and I'm sure that will elicit quite a bit of controversy, or at least quite a bit of discussion when we take a look at the brackets and the resulting. And again, it is all up to the fans as you vote on Twitter at TUM Basketball. All right, let's go to the 2000s bracket now. As we take a look at the bracket, this is not a surprise at all. The number 1 seed is the 1999-2000 basketball team, Bill Self's third team. They went 32-5, best ever record in TU history. They won the WAC championship. They lost in the WAC tournament finals to Fresno State. And obviously then everybody knows about their run in the tournament. They were very, very underseeded at number 7 in the South Regional. They beat UNLV, they beat the 2 seed Cincinnati, and then they went to the regionals and defeated Miami and played for a trip to the Final Four, losing to North Carolina. The Elite Eight team lost 5 games by a total of 11 points. So they are the number 1 seed, and you would have to think one of the clear favorites in that 2000s bracket. Now the number 4 seed, it is the 2007-2008 basketball team, the team that won a championship in the CBI, coached by Doug Wojcik. They went 25-14. They had a great run in the 08 CUSA tournament. They lost to number 2 Memphis in the finals after making that run. And then, of course, they got a bid to the brand new CBI, the first ever CBI tournament, and Tulsa wins it, beating Miami of Ohio, Utah, Houston, and then in the best of 3 series, they bested Bradley 2-1. And voting begins on this matchup on March 30th at 9 a.m. All right, the bottom of the bracket of the 2000s looks like this. The number 2 seed is the 2001-2002 team, and that team was a 27-7 team coached by John Phillips his first year. They went 15-3 in the WAC, and they were the co-champions in the Western Athletic Conference, but they lost in the tournament finals to Hawaii. But they still were slotted into the NCAA as a number 12 seed, and they were able to go to St. Louis and beat Marquette on the last-second shot by Greg Harrington, and then they lost to Kentucky and Tubby Smith in the second round. So that's the number 2 seed. The number 3 seed is the 2000-2001 basketball team that won the NIT championship. Coached by Buzz Peterson, they went 26-11. They were second place in the WAC, and then they lost in a heartbreaker in the WAC tournament title game right here at the Reynolds Center in overtime to Hawaii. But they turned that around. They beat Cal Irvine and then went on the road and in consecutive games and only had 1 day off in between, beat Minnesota, then went down to Mississippi State and beat Mississippi State, and then went to the Big Apple, went to New York City, and defeated Memphis and Alabama to win the NIT title. So there you have the 2000s bracket, and gentlemen, I don't think there's any question there's a clear favorite here in this bracket, but there's some good basketball teams there.
Yes, I mean, even the 2001 and 2008 teams, even though they didn't go to the NCAA tournament, anytime you can win a national tournament of any kind, that is a great achievement. And that 2001 team, the odds were stacked against them to win the NIT with the schedule they were given in the NIT, with only 1 home game and then 2 very tough road assignments before going to New York. So that team, of course, with several players from the 2000 Elite Eight team, that was a team that I think many people thought should have been in the NCAA tournament. You've got to give them a lot of credit. And then in 2008, Jerome Jordan, Ben Uzo, a lot of fun times as that team jump-started the excitement about TU basketball again.
Yeah, there's no question. There's some great players with that team. You look at those early years, that guard-oriented. I mean, you had Harrington, and you had Dante Swanson, and you had Reed, and you had Hill. I mean, some strong backcourts. I mean, yes. three guard lineups, and they were very difficult to beat. A lot of teams.
I mentioned earlier about, I thought Ricky Ross was one of the top 5 clutch shooters in TU history. I put Greg Harrington in that category as well. And Marcus Hill, 2001 NIT MVP. What a run he had.
I'd put Dante Swanson in there too.
Yes,
as far as scorers and guys
yes.
that are clutch shooters.
Yeah, and you're talking about the John Phillips' second or his first team. I'm sorry, the team that defeated Marquette and Dwayne Wade, and then loses to Kentucky. Played great in that game. Had it not been for a tremendous performance by Tubby Smith's team, I think that team might have had a deeper run.
There's no question. I'm trying to think of his name. He played pro basketball for a few years. Scored 40 in that game for Kentucky.
Prince.
Yeah.
Tayshaun Prince.
Prince was great in that game. If not for him, I think Tulsa advances.
There's no question. But yeah, I mean, that's a really good bracket, really competitive bracket. Obviously, CBI team just finished 6th in the league, but had a run there that was pretty strong.
All right, so there you have it. That is the 2000 bracket, and let's move now to the 2010s bracket as we continue here. And again, the voting, going back to the 2000s, will be on the 30th of March at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. for your votes on Twitter. Let's move to the 2010s bracket now, and your number 1 seed is The 2015-2016 basketball team, coached by Frank Haith. It was his second team. They went 20-12. They tied for third in the American, was competitive the entire year for a championship. And then they lost in the tournament to Memphis. They were the number 11 seed in the East, and they went to the first four in Dayton and lost to Michigan in Ohio. Michigan winning that game, and then Michigan another couple of years later end up making a very deep run in the NCAA. So that's your number 1 seed. The number 4 seed in the 2010s is the 2014-15 team, coached by Frank Haith. That was his first team, and that was a very good team that won 23-11. They were just coming off an NCAA berth under Danny Manning, and Frank Haith took them really quite deep in the season, and then quite deep, obviously, and into postseason play. But that team ended up second in the American Athletic Conference after starting 10-0 in the league, and they were 14-2 in the league before losing their final 2 games and losing in the decisive game against SMU. Then they lost to UConn in the semifinals of the American Athletic Conference tournament, and they got an NIT bid. They ended up beating William & Mary, but losing to Murray State. Voting on that begins on April 3rd at 9 a.m. Let's go to the bottom of the 2010's bracket, and it is the number 2 seed, the 2019-2020 TU basketball team that won 21-10 and unfortunately had an unfinished season. Coached, of course, by Frank Haith, the co-champion of the American Athletic Conference. And as everybody knows, no tournament because of the coronavirus. But as you look at what they did this year, they ended up beating number 20 Memphis, number 23 Wichita State, and a team that was picked 10th ended up being the co-champion in the American Athletic Conference, and clearly an NCAA or an NIT team, no question about it. All right, let's go to the number 3 seed now. It is the 2013-2014 basketball team, coached by Danny Manning. 21-13 the final record. They won the CUSA co-championship in the regular season, and then they went down to El Paso and won the Conference USA tournament championship, defeating Louisiana Tech in the finals. They were a 13th seed in the NCAA tournament out west in San Diego, and they lost to UCLA by a final score of 76-59, but clearly a very good team, had a good long winning streak toward the end and captured the CUSA title. Voting on that game will begin, or that matchup will begin on April 3rd, starting at 11 a.m. So there you have the 2010s, and gentlemen, your thoughts on that bracket. What I would say is it was almost impossible or really hard to seed the 4 teams because I think they're virtually even, to be honest with you. But clearly those 4 teams are the best of the 2010s. There were not a lot of arguments as to another team that might be included in there. Would you agree?
No, I'd agree with you, Bruce, and any one of those teams could beat any team. I mean, you just never know what team's going to show up, and you know, some strong performances from Frank's teams, and Danny Manning had a pretty good roster there, but had a lot of different elements of those teams, and could beat anyone on any given night, given that you know, how many top 25 teams have Frank Haith's teams beaten? Quite a few over the last 3-4 years.
James Woodard and Shaq Harrison, big parts of 3 of those teams, and of course Shaq's now in the NBA.
Yeah, clearly some argument can go on, certainly on the seeding, and I think you could probably make an argument of shuffling any of those anywhere because I'm not saying it's apples to oranges, but what it is you have 4 very strong teams and no favorite, I would say, in the 4 teams. You think?
It would be tough. It's a toss-up. I guess I would give the edge to. I'm going to give the edge to 2014, but it's a toss-up.
Yeah.
The guard play. You know,
there you go again.
Yeah, the guard play. But yeah, I think it is a toss-up, Bruce. I think any one of those teams, it would be interesting to see how people vote on this group, especially this quadrant.
So there you have the 2010s bracket, and we are all set to go on Selection Friday. All the brackets have been filled in, and now it's time for you to vote on Twitter at TUM Basketball, and let's see how it plays out. The final voting will be done on April 6th, and follow us, of course, on all your social media outlets that you use and figure out exactly what happens in the tournament, and again, vote early and often. And guys, again, we have to thank you for doing this, and it's it's really for fun. It's really fun to kind of go back on the legacy of University of Tulsa basketball, and you know, I appreciate you guys doing it, and it's you know, we urge fans to get involved and kind of vote and reminisce a little bit about the great moments of TU basketball.
Yeah, that's what this is all about. You know, fans get involved, and you know, we have great history. I mean, since that 80-81 NIT championship team Nolan brought here, the history of Tulsa basketball has been outstanding, and you know, we like to see what our fans think. I have in mind my Final Four, so we'll be interested to see how mine matches up with the fan votes.
Yeah,
me too. And yes, anytime you can think about all the great moments in TU basketball history, it is really a lot of fun. And when you look up at the banners here at the Reynolds Center, there is a great basketball tradition here at the University of Tulsa.
Gentlemen, again, thank you, and that wraps it up for Selection Friday. We'll see how the vote comes out. Thanks for joining us.